Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and often in conversations about sales, you hear how important it is to be aggressive, or that you should always be closing or have a go-getter mindset. Which brings up a question for me. We've got Mike Simmons here with us today. Mike, how does patience play into the mindset of a sales professional?
Great question. I think a lot of the people who work with me kind of question how much patience I have. Most of it's probably because of nonverbal. So they see the vein popping out of my head when I start getting frustrated with different things. But patience is important. And that whole idea of always be closing is just, it's one of those things where I think a lot of the sales profession gets a bad rap for that. And I know Saturday Night Live made a joke on it with always be cobbling. That's a pretty good skit that they did that you can find on YouTube. But you talk about go-getter. I think Dan Tyre was on here earlier and he talked about being a go-giver. Always giving back to your customer, always giving back in those relationships, always taking the focus of what's important to the customer. And I think from a rep perspective, when you talk about patience, it's really important for all of us to play the long game and know that life is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It's not about what are you doing today, tomorrow, and the next day, and how are you checking things off of that list. It's about how are you moving yourself forward as a business professional, as someone who's focused on your family, as someone who maybe is focused on your career, as somebody who's focused on your business and making your business successful for the long term. When it comes to operating a business, if you're only focused on that next 30, 60, 90 days, you may look back 2 years from now and say, what did I really accomplish? I kind of went around in circles over a 30, 60, 90-day period. So patience to me is critical when it comes to the mindset of the sales rep. And I think it applies both in the way that you work with your customers and the way that you work on potential career growth opportunities. Play the long game and let that game come to you.
Well, you've talked about really two different forks of patience there, and I would like you to speak a little more about each of them. The first is patience with your customers. Tell me more about that, about the long game and kind of waiting for things to come to you with potential customers.
Well, so one of the things, and I've had this conversation with a couple of members of the team recently where we talk about urgency. You can't create urgency for your client. Just like with the exception, maybe Jen can create some urgency for me and Rebecca probably for you and Kellyanne for Mike, because there are things that have to get done around the house. And now all of a sudden I've got some urgency if I want to keep everybody happy. But when you're talking about your client, you can't create that urgency for them. You may be able to reveal urgency. You may be able to identify urgency through the questions you ask. So rather than pushing and saying, how is this thing coming along? Or when can I expect this to get done? Or when are you going to be able to do this next thing? Put yourself in the mindset of the client and ask them more questions about things from a timeline perspective, from their perspective. How does the process work on their end? Where in the process have things historically broken down? Take when I'm thinking about a solution that we deliver to clients, I always take the perspective that if it's the right solution and I've identified the right problem inside their organization or right need inside their organization, it's just a matter of time before they come to the realization that we're the right partner to work with. And if they choose another partner, if they choose a competitor, my expectation is that they'll come around and they'll come back to us at some point in time because we do X, Y, or Z better. So don't make it about feature functionality. Don't make it about the product. Don't make it about this thing that we've got to do today. I think one of the more common mistakes that reps make in the negotiation process is that whole idea of if you can get the deal done today or done this week or this month, I can get another 5% discount or 10% discount. I've never been in a situation where I've gone back to that organization who's put the 5 or 10% discount in front of me 3 days after the month or 6 days after the month or 2 weeks later or even 2 months later and have not been able to get that number again. So be careful what you throw out there to try to create urgency. Those are just tricks, and most clients know the game. So be patient, listen to the customer, understand what they value in the solution that you're delivering. Make sure that you can articulate that value back to them and validate it, and then just have those steps come together. Jody, I don't know if that hit the mark or not.
Oh, no, that's good. That's good. Let's move to the next one then, and that is patience with your career as a sales professional.
Yeah, same kind of thing. I mean, so for me, when I think about career, I've been very fortunate. I've always kind of moved around throughout my career, whether it's moving around inside an organization or outside of an organization. I realized that if I do things more than about 18 months to 24 months, I get frustrated. I get bored. I figure I've cracked the code and now I need a new challenge. And I know that about my personality type. I know that about my general mentality. But for a rep who's new in their career and they've been in an SDR role for 6 months and they've done some really great things in that 6-month period of time, that doesn't mean that they know everything about being in an SDR role and that they're ready to move into that next level inside the organization. I continue to look for new ways that you can improve and hone your craft. Maybe you've been an SDR who's focused on inbound, and most of the business comes from an inbound content marketing strategy like HubSpot adopts. That's a different SDR role than an SDR who is focused on outbound. And what does cold outreach look like? Leverage mentors in the organization, people who've experienced the things that you want to do at some point in time, and ask them, how long did it take them to get to where they wanted to go? As I look back at it, I use that 18 to 24 month period. That's about the point where I feel like I've been able to get enough experience in a given role before I'm ready for that next challenge. If you think you can do it in 6 months, you may be a much faster learner than I am, but I would ask you to look in the mirror, ask those tough questions, think through all of the scenarios that you've been involved in. And is your reason for wanting to move, or your reason for expecting to move into that next role, or your reason for doing whatever it is that you want to do, driven by your own personal ego? Or is it because you want personal challenges?
Well, Mike, I'm going to turn this and do one more because you supervise sales professionals. So give me an idea of the importance of patience for someone like you that supervises other people who are working with customers and trying to manage a career.
Yeah, I think that patience is important there in that side. And that patience really is demonstrated in the questions that you ask inside the organization. The realization that you don't really ever know everything you think you know. So when I think about it from those discussions that I've had with reps before, if it's been focused on, hey, I'd like to lead a team, on my side, I usually will ask the follow-up question around, why is that something that you're interested in? What's motivating you to pursue something like that? What are your expectations? What are some of the challenges you expect to be confronted with in that kind of a role? And through some of those questions, you can identify, is the person really interested in leading a team because they think that's an easier role than being in an individual contributor role? Do they think it's more glamorous because there's a title associated with it? Do they think that it is just the next thing that they need to do? And depending on where they are in their career and where they are in that decision process and how they answer those questions, the coaching will be a bit different. The coaching there could be some challenges to some of the assumptions there. It could turn into, wow, now I've got someone who I know is really motivated to move into that kind of a role. And I need to look for opportunities inside the organization for them to test some of those concepts and test some of those ideas. And they can test in that environment with some training wheels and some help and give them some additional exposure while they continue to do their day job so that they have a chance to learn if that role really is the right thing for them, or if they may be kind of misunderstanding what it really means to be in that role.
Working with up-and-coming sales professionals, or seasoned, I guess, can you tell when somebody has patience?
Awesome question, Jody. The way that I can tell that is through their behavior and their interaction. Verbal, nonverbal, questions they ask, how engaged they are in the conversation after the first conversation. Are there things that they do to try to trigger a response that is more focused on them than on some other objective? So I think you can tell, and the way that you tell, or the way that I historically have been able to keep track of that, is through, like I said, verbal, nonverbal, the types of questions they ask, and the engagement. The other thing that is really interesting to me and demonstrates a level of competence and aptitude and also attitude is the initiative that someone takes on their own, researching what it means to be in that other role, discussions they have with others who have been in that role, and then sharing that research. Sharing that research to me demonstrates that they've taken the time and energy to go out and understand that next thing that they're looking to do. So I think you can tell in their attitude and in the way that they work with you.
Okay. Last question as we round this out, because I may hear this and think, oh gosh, I'm not very patient with my customers, with my coworkers, with my career, and I want to change that. So what advice do you have for me if that's the case?
Always have a plan. Identify that 30, 60, 90, 365 day plan of what you want to accomplish, why you want to accomplish it. Create some guideposts that you're going to go through that you control directly, and know which guideposts are going to be limited by others. Yeah, if you have a plan and you understand your why behind that plan, then you can start executing on the individual tactical things that'll help you get through each of those guideposts. So the first piece of advice is, I would say, start with a plan. Ask yourself why you want to do this thing that you want to do, and go from there.
All right, Mike, this has been great advice about patience. If you have a question you would like Mike to answer on the show, you can just send us an email to hello@catalystsale.com. You can also find past episodes of the show, not only on iTunes and Stitcher, places where you find podcasts, but they're all right there on catalystsale.com as well. So thank you again, Mike, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.